This week, hey, it helps my microphone's on. This week, Emilie St-Pierre, Senior Manager for Product and Infrastructure Testing at Thermo Fisher Scientific, joins us to discuss penetration testing and tell some stories. In the security news, there is no National Cyber Director. Time to move away from MOVEit. Update Microsoft IIS at least every 6 years. Your security system is not secure. For that matter, neither is your smart pet feeder. Identity management is hard, at least for some. Spies using spy gadgets to spy on spies. Go ahead and just replace your hardware. Secure boot is hard, bypassing the BIOS password, but don't try this at home or at work for that matter. Rob shaved his beard. What's new in PCI? Drink. Are we still drinking on PCI? If so, drink again. Right. If your firmware isn't patched, no cloud updates for you. And Gigabyte has a back door. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly. This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. Do your top-performing analysts know how much you appreciate them? Now's your opportunity to show them. And no, we don't mean just throwing your team a pizza party. Instead, nominate your team members for the 3rd annual SOC Analyst Appreciation Day Awards program. Devo is recognizing analysts who continuously learn new skills, effectively collaborate, and remain level-headed even under immense pressure. The deadline to nominate analysts is June 30th, and Devo will announce and celebrate the winners during SOC Analyst Appreciation Day in October. Submit your nomination today at securityweekly.com/Devo.
Welcome to the show. First, let me introduce you to the man who's enjoyed another year of marriage, even though week to week it's kind of nip and tuck, and enjoyed the best Father's Day ever, Mr. Paul Asadorian.
Welcome, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly, coming to you in super low definition compliments of Darth Vader himself. This is episode number 788, being recorded on June 21st, 2023, right here in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. If I get my teleprompter to cooperate with me. Let's see. In studio with us, Mr. Jeff Mann is visiting.
Hey!
What's up, Jeff?
It's great to be here. It's been a while, and we've seen each other so much at conferences. I thought, what the heck? I'll come up to Rhode Island.
Right? We can't get enough of each other. Mr. Jason Albuquerque has joined us.
Hey, what's happening?
In studio.
Good to be here from BSW.
I kind of bribed you. I bribed you with cigars and booze.
Dude, that's all it takes, man. That's all it takes.
Even though I didn't show up to that one BSW episode.
Seriously, the 300th episode where we brought in all of the previous hosts. And guess who slacked?
I'm busy.
Busy man.
I know.
It's okay.
But I had you on our show, so there's that.
Yes. I forgive you.
Yeah, thank you. Mandy Logan is remote, coming to you live. Mandy, welcome.
I am. I'm actually, you can see, super hacker background here.
Apparently,
I'm being
very
clandestine and intense. I feel like I'm in a cartoon right now.
In some ways, you are on this show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For sure.
It kind of has a Blues Clues vibe about it for some reason.
Yes, something.
Very elite cognition stuff going on here.
Yeah. Mr. Aaron Leland is here with us. Aaron, welcome.
Hello, good night. I'm very sad this evening with all the lovely hosts that are in G-Unit Studios this evening, and I'm just stuck in central London. Boo me.
Boo.
It's pretty late there. Thanks for staying up with us, Aaron. It's good to have you, albeit remote.
Thank you very much.
Let's see. Follow Security Weekly on LinkedIn for show highlights and more by searching for Security Weekly Productions, on LinkedIn.
Makes sense.
If you want links to all of my social media, podcast gear recommendation, links to the podcast I listen to, technical how-to blog posts, and links to my upcoming and previous presentations, you can visit my website at securitypodcaster.com. Emily is a longtime pen tester and currently leads pen testing engagements for medical devices and infrastructure at Thermo Fisher Scientific. Outside of her offensive security work, she is the privacy and security ambassador for Future Ada, helping survivors of abuse and marginalized persons regain a sense of safety and control over their lives, both digitally and in real life. Emily, welcome to the show.
Hi, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's nice to have you. I see you've also made a cocktail. We didn't really make cocktails. We just made martinis. Cocktail. It was really only one ingredient, which was vodka to my martini. So technically, I don't think that counts as a cocktail. But you made an actual cocktail.
I did. So I don't know if I can, I don't want to tip it over too much, but this is a lavender gin sour. I infused some simple syrup with lavender yesterday. And I added gin, freshly squeezed lemon juice, egg whites, that simple syrup with the lavender, and a little bit of green chartreuse or chartreuse.
Wow, that sounds amazing. You definitely, I'm jealous for sure.
Smooth.
Emily, how'd you get your start in information security?
Oh boy. It started about 10 years ago. I went back to school in my early 20s, and I wanted to be a network administrator. I thought that sounded cool. I had read a really good book called Tubes by Andrew Blum. Fantastic book. It's a physical journey through the internet, and it made me fall in love with networking. But as I was going to school, I discovered security, offensive security. Big shout out to SecurityTube back in the day, Vivek
Nice.
Ramachandra.
Yeah.
That channel really got me into Wi-Fi pen testing, and from there I wanted to do web application and learn everything I could. So I got an internship. Back then I lived in Las Vegas, and I got an internship at a small consultancy firm, and I learned the ropes. I learned about every time I could find a new way to hack. My boss at the time, she was fantastic. She was like, "Oh, you can do this? Okay, great. Well, then you can do this to our clients, right? You can we can do a network pen test now that you know how to pen test networks. Oh, we could do a social engineering or something like that." And it was really fun. From there, I went on to Rapid7 for a couple of years, which really solidified my basic knowledge of pen testing, my fundamentals, and now am out at Thermo Fisher Scientific. So I'll be honest, it was a very fast-paced type of, how do you say, way into pen testing.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I mean, that's a lot of the path people want to take is into pen testing, right?
Yeah.
And people get there in different ways too. I wanted to ask, when you were in Las Vegas, did you go to Defcon or Black Hat when you were out there?
I did.
What was
Oh
your
my gosh,
first?
yes.
Yeah, what was your first Defcon like?
It was Defcon 20, and it was fabulous. It was really cool. I didn't know that much. I just would go into different talks and challenge myself to learn the lingo, to learn more about a technology, even if sometimes, I don't know if you remember when you started in anything technical, but you would go into these talks and it's just going 12 feet above your head. It's just, but you're trying.
Just saying, that still happens to me
Okay.
pretty often, Emily, so don't feel bad.
All right, great. So then you know how it works. You try to absorb as much as you can. And what was really magical about that DEF CON is I made some friends. I made some local friends, which were part of the SynShop hackerspace out in Las Vegas. Big shout out, still exists. Wonderful, wonderful place, wonderful folks. And from there, I just did a lot of crypto workshops, different types of community workshops there, which was really fun, and got to just learn a lot of really cool different skills like welding, soldering, and just more hacking.
I mean, I want to go back to, made a comment about learning the lingo. And one thing that I've been kind of picking on still to this day, even in recent talks I've given, is making analogies to my wife who works in healthcare. And when she and anyone really starts in any more formal healthcare program, everyone has to take a class on healthcare lingo. I don't think it's called healthcare lingo, but you know what I'm getting at. There's a lot of terminology very specific to healthcare, similar to how there's a lot of terminology very specific to what we do. And I kind of wish there was, and you're probably wishing this too, right? If there was one thing we could do better to get people in the field, would it be like even a basic thing is like help people learn the lingo?
Oh, 100%. I think even if we had like a community GitHub project where we could just crowdsource different lingo, different categories of technology or of different industries would be super helpful. You mentioned ways to learn that lingo outside of this project. I'm just putting
this
out
project
there.
that anyone listening that wants to take on this project, we're just putting that on you. If you're listening, you're like, that's a good idea. Could if you go do that for us, it'd be great. Thanks.
Another way that's actually super fun to learn that is at the Biohacking Village. So actually some of my colleagues, they work really hard to get this CTF out every year at Defcon. It's completely free. It's super fun. It's very accessible. And part of that CTF challenge is like learning the medical lingo, learning the different regulations. So I do invite folks to join the Biohacking Village, Capture the Flag this year. If you're going to DEF CON, I think it's going to be a great time. You want to learn the lingo.
And I absolutely love that.
You don't have to put anything in your body or anything as part of the CTF biohacking thing, do you?
Don't have to.
You don't have to.
You don't have to. You can choose to.
No, it's encouraged, but I don't think
Sometimes
you
you
have
have
to.
to. Just stop putting things in your body.
No, I was just going to say, I absolutely love that because, once we can come up with our own, let's call it encyclopedia of our own lingo, the next key to the puzzle is how do we translate that back to the business?
Right.
Right? So having the ability to translate our language back to the healthcare vertical, back to the financial industry vertical, back to public sector, whatever the case may be, that allows us to be more influential in the business. So,
See, Jeff, what we need is a universal translator.
We do need a universal translator. I'm not disagreeing with all this discussion of lingo, but
There's a but. I hear but.
there's always a but. Out of curiosity, you've only been in the business about 10 years, Emilie, and there's no right or wrong answer. This is just more for demonstration purposes. But how would you define penetration testing?
Wow.
Yeah, I
we
heard that
didn't.
coming, so I was going to take a sip.
I know, right?
Take a gulp. It's okay.
We didn't. We just jumped right into it.
Yeah, it's like we'll give you a second to think while we say that's really harsh, Jeff.
Well, it's not meant to be harsh.
Yeah, we didn't ease into that question at all. It just came right out. Sorry.
Well, let me qualify it, Emilie. I started pen testing 30 years ago, and 30 years ago, all there was pen testing. There was no other terms for it. And so in my mind, I'm kind of fossilized on a definition of penetration testing.
You know what that makes you, Jeff?
Old.
Yes.
It occurred to me over the past couple of years that when I talk about penetration testing, especially to younger people, which is pretty much everybody else, they may not be thinking the same thing I'm thinking. So so I'm wholeheartedly for and the proper term is a lexicon of our lingo with some working definitions, but for many of our terms, there's going to be more than one definition, or
Jeff,
there's not going to be any universal agreement. Yes, that term means this.
You're dead on because even stakeholders in the business don't have a good definition of what pen testing is.
Nope.
You can speak to a business leader and they think a pen test is a vulnerability scan.
All right, let's
Right?
let Emilie answer the question.
Yeah, I want to hear. No, but Emilie, you're a pen tester. You've been doing it for 10 years. You got into it. Just doesn't even have to be a definition. Words that describe it, activities, goals, objectives. How would you describe a pen test to somebody that wants to hire you to do a pen test or wants to learn about what you do? How would you describe it?
I just find that it's easiest to describe things first by what it's not. So I think we've heard I forget who said vulnerability scan. It is not a vulnerability scan.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the other end of the spectrum, it's also not a red team engagement. Because I think there's a lot of people want red team, but really what they want is a pen test. So it's really in between, right? So you have this approach to a client, to whatever's in scope. So it could be a site, a building, a technology, and we're talking networks, API, like web applications, containers, cloud, et cetera, whatever that is in scope. You are testing the security controls, policies, defenses in place, but you're not necessarily being the most advanced adversary. I would say there's a little bit of, it's hard to say, but I'm just thinking of how different folks do pen testing, right? Which can be like an open approach where you have access to repositories, to folks that can inform you with questions, or you can try to do like more that black box approach, where you kind of do your best, use a mix of automated tools, but a really big focus on manual approaches without necessarily being the most advanced adversary. So yeah, I'm going to leave it at that.
So are those things that you determine that level of scope based on the rules of engagement that you agree upon up front? Are you having those conversations up front with your stakeholders and saying, here are the rules of engagement, here's how far we will go, and here's where we'll take the pen test, and it's something that you mutually agree upon?
Every time, I think, every time. And especially now that I focused from being a consultant into an internal pen testing team. We have that conversation every time about setting expectations with our internal customers, our product teams, our infrastructure teams. So because we want to be on the same page every time, because that's where you'll find that maybe some folks really thought that that was completely automated, right? That it was a vulnerability scan. And we really want to make sure we determine that level of engagement. I don't know about folks here that have done pen testing, but I like to have a dialogue that's ongoing throughout the pen test engagement. I don't want there to be necessarily any surprises. I like for folks to ask questions about why we do things a certain way. Why would a product team pick a certain design choice? Because those conversations are really important in order for folks to understand how we approach things, how we view things, how we attack things, and then start thinking about remediation. But also, when you're having these discussions, you're kind of training their evil thinking muscles, like your customers. And it's such a great skill to have for them, because the next time you'll meet with them, they're like, oh, I already thought that you might try this, so we already planned to remediate this.
That's winning.
Yeah,
that's winning.
That's amazing. I couldn't agree more. And we've heard a lot of people who've done physical assessments say the same thing. Larry tells this great story. On air, off air.
Moving along.
Bob tells a story when, year one shows up on physical pen tests and gets in and all that stuff. Like year two, same Bob walks into the building and immediately someone goes, that person can't be here, get them out. We saw them last year. And we all got in trouble. I mean, not that it was the best thing for people to get in trouble, but I believe that was the story. Like, we all got in trouble because, we failed the assessment, right? But they learned to, process that kind of evil thinking, as you say, Emily.
Yeah, no, it's funny because that story reminds me of a time where I went on site as an external consulting, and I was going for an internal network penetration test along with other colleagues. And I think that person had been way too primed about what to expect from pen testers. Because I was the first one. I like to be early. I was the first one on site, went down in the lobby, waited to go up, to go work. And this one network admin just saw me and was like, no, absolutely not. You're going back downstairs. I was like, I'm actually here for a network pen test. I promise we're not, I was not paid for a social engineering engagement. I'm just here to do my work.
Did he know that you had pretended to be pregnant on a previous engagement and was like, no way?
That was pre-pregnancy pretext.
Okay, but now you gotta tell the. I don't want to phrase this. You gotta tell the pregnancy story, but you gotta tell us a story about that one time where you pretended to be pregnant on a bed test.
Sure. I do love that story, and I still have the silicone belly with me in case I need to
Just in
whip it
case.
out. But so for a different engagement, this was for a bank, and it was out in the Southwest United States. And this one was pretty difficult because there were 2 locations, and there was, 4 days, which means you only had 2 days per location. So one day would be recon. You do a little bit of recon as much as you can, beforehand, but it's hard when you have other engagements. So you really have mostly the 1 day for recon. So I would put on like a disguise, like a cap, some like sporty clothes, something, just no makeup, really low key. And then the next day I would come back and look completely different. And part of that look was having a fake pregnancy belly. You can buy it off Amazon. It's full of silicone, basically. And I got the 6 to 7 month model because I wanted it to be apparent, but not the max.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
And shout out to Summer Lee, who I talked to before that. She's a great social engineer, and so she helped me with this. And anyway, so for this one bank, first location, total bust, like did not work. I wasn't able to get anything great. It was a very secure location, just didn't work out. Second location, I'm like, all right, this has got to happen because I failed the first site. I can't fail the second site. So I go into this bank. I see that most employees are having their weekly meeting or their early morning meeting. They're all busy. So I'm in there, I'm waiting, and someone asked me at the reception, like, hey, like, can you come back later? Because everyone's in a meeting. I said, well, actually, my husband dropped me off and it's really hot. And, can I just stay here? He won't be back, until later. So
Did
if
you
you
have
don't
that?
mind.
Sorry, Emma. Did you have that pretext already, or were you making up as you go?
No, I just made it up.
Oh, that's awesome. It's awesome.
Like, I don't want to
Better.
leave.
Yeah.
Right. So I was like, so I just stayed there and waited for something to happen. And the senior manager of the bank at the time came downstairs, and I just want you to paint you a picture. He was this sweet older man, and he was like, hi, how can I help you? I'm sorry everyone's in a meeting, but what can I help you with today? What are you looking to get at this bank? I was like, well, I'm starting my own business, and so we're looking, my husband and I are going to start our own business together, and we want to look at small to medium sized loans. We're pretty well versed. We have a couple other businesses, but we're moving here. So you will want to see like what your rates are like, etc. He's like, oh, okay, well, if you want, we can talk here. And I was like, oh, it's kind of hot here. Can we just talk somewhere else? I also don't, want to put that out too much. She's like, yeah, no problem. So we go to his office. I'm like, great, there's computers in offices, there's like opportunities. And with me, I did have a Bush Bunny, which I had loaded with 2 different types of scripts. So one was a local Wi-Fi password dumping script. And on the other switch, I had a reverse shell that was going to go back into one of my virtual private servers that was listening and hopefully get a reverse shell. So I have 2. I always have like an external one, and in case it gets blocked, I always have a local script. So we're chit-chatting. Again, he's being so sweet. He's telling me all about like how you can, rent books locally, like everything the libraries have, because he thinks we're new in town, and everything. And so at some point, I'm getting really hot. These fake pregnancy bellies are very hot, just so you know, like your belly will sweat under it.
Oh, so you weren't even like you weren't even like lying to him when you're like, I'm really hot.
I was really getting hot. I was like a little nervous.
It emulates menopause, by the way.
Yeah.
Right. Work with what you got. And I was like, I'm sorry, can I stop you for a second? Do you have a glass of water? I'm so sorry, but I am so hot right now. I'm kind of dying. If anything would help. And he's like, oh, of course, no problem. And he leaves the office. He leaves me alone in his office. So then I just got up and tried like switch 1. And then as soon as the little light popped up, tried switch 2. And then I went back into the seat. And now I'm sweating even more. So he comes back and I'm like, oh, just in time.
That's so great. That's great.
I was just about to pass out. Now I gotta ask, Emily, did you like have like a pocket in the belly where you kept some of your bash buddies?
Pocket in the belly.
I did not. It would be awkward to like be doing like this, like getting something out of under the baby shit. Like might be suspicious, but totally there are opportunities to like make some space within. It's a solid silicone mold, so you could definitely make some pockets if you wanted to like bypass security, put something into that silicone belly. You could, and then just go retrieve it, go to the restroom, grab that whatever you need, and retrieve it that way.
Yeah, I'm thinking like a Proxmark with an antenna, and the antenna's just sticking out a little bit where the belly button is. That might work actually.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I'm so glad you're not pen testing anymore, Paul.
But I don't think it would be as effective if I were to wear the fake. I mean, maybe people would just think I drank a lot of beer.
Yeah, it was nice. Everyone opened doors for me. Everyone was so nice.
You wear it on weekends now. It's great.
Yeah, I should.
It always gets her into the clubs for free.
Right. Yeah.
No cover for the pregnant women.
I just think you could just wear it and order martinis and just see people's reaction.
Yeah, freak out.
Yeah. I don't know.
You should wear it at Defcon. I think the goons would go insane trying to figure out how they could help you without offending you in any way whatsoever.
I could. I am gooning this year though, so I feel like they would know.
You could be a pregnant goon.
There you go.
Nobody would mess with you.
Nobody would
Right,
know
but-
except if they listened to this show before they went to Defcon.
If there's a situation, happening and a pregnant goon comes in and shuts things down, right? Because we're like, all right, fine. Don't want to deal with this.
Any other like memorable stories, Emily, from your times pen testing? Especially, I feel like social engineering and physical engagement lend themselves to really funny stories.
They do. Social engineering is fun, but I do have a story I was hoping to bring today to the show because of kind of my new position in terms of like looking more so at devices and medical or science devices. One of them is related to DNA databases. And I wanted to bring up a really interesting pen test I've done before. It was not for my current employer, it was for someone else. But basically, we had this device for this pen test. It was able to take, DNA samples, and one vendor for this particular engagement had a web application that you could interact. So if you were a case manager, if you were the DA, if you were an officer, you would use this web application to take a look at evidence, take a look at PHI, to take a look at the profile, take a look at who was like linked to that digital piece of DNA evidence. And for this one in particular, what was really interesting is that at the time, and this has been fixed since then, but at the time you could bypass the login, and because it asked for 2 different parameters via the login, I was able to change these parameters so that it would redirect me to that username parameter, and then you can masquerade as anyone on this web application. And the impact that that would have had in terms of digital chain of custody, right? Where if you have prosecutors, you can have officers that are using a very vulnerable database where their DNA evidence is stored that they use for their cases. I mean, just the implications were immense. And so I thought that that was one of the most interesting pen tests I've done. And I did speak to one of a detective I know here, and asked him, like, has this ever been brought to court, right? When you're presenting evidence, especially DNA evidence, like people tend to have a pretty high level of trust in it. But obviously how that DNA evidence is stored, which is digital, as security practitioners, we know that those databases, those applications, those systems contain vulnerabilities. And he said it's never been brought up in court as far as his experience was in court, to have a legal argument against DNA evidence because it was stored on an insecure system or a system that was proven to easily dismantle that digital chain of custody.
That's an interesting challenge, though, because now you're challenging the integrity of the data.
Right.
Right? Where you can come back and you can say, because I know this is a vulnerable system, that chain of custody could have been compromised, and the integrity of this data should be thrown out. Mm-hmm. That's an interesting legal challenge.
Now you have defense attorneys all across the nation going, wait, can we?
Right.
Is this? Can we raise this objection now?
Right.
Yeah. As soon as any defensive attorneys, I think, get wind of that's a possibility, oh my gosh, that would be a constant.
Uh-huh.
Right. It's just interesting to know. Like, I mean, I got access to this. I was able to change anything like in that profile. Like, the biggest thing I wanted to showcase in my report was that I could just change the name and date of birth and whatever. So I could have in that database something linked to a different person than whatever that actual DNA would typically be linked to. So it was just a really interesting one. I didn't see anything else on how security vulnerabilities are being brought up in court in terms of criminal cases, but I'd love to hear more about it if anyone that's watching.
Yeah, my case should be thrown out because there was a vulnerability or a cyber
or
attack
the potential.
against this.
Just
or
the potential of that chain of custody being broken.
Right. Well, it's like any other evidence if the chain of custody.
You can't
is broken.
prove that it wasn't. So.
Right. Is it chain of custody or is that tampering with evidence? I guess it's in the same.
It's chain of custody because you can't prove the integrity of that chain of custody.
Right. I also.
Oh, sorry. She's saying that she could take the actual data of the DNA information and switch it to as if it applies to a different person. Mm-hmm. I don't know that that's always chain of custody. It seems like that would kind of be, tampering with evidence.
Yeah.
But digitally.
But I guess the chain of custody was broken, and they didn't know that it was broken. Like, you have no evidence that chain of custody was broken. Because chain of custody is
you change but you change the tags on the evidence bag. You didn't change the evidence itself. Sort of, I think, is what Emily you're describing, right?
Yeah, you're tampering with evidence, basically. Yeah, so that comes back with, Vandy. I would rely more on Vandy than on me for these questions.
But it also, there's dangerous situations where this also plays out in the medical devices as well. Because I will have similar conversations, like we'll cover a story, and there was one story we covered about, and it comes up every once in a while, about people who are doing research into like breaking into medical imaging systems and doing the same thing. So now we're not talking about the murderer is not this person A, it's now person B. Tampering with a medical thing is like you have cancer, but no, I changed the medical image so you really don't have cancer, or the other way around. And that's really bad too. And a lot of those systems suffer from vulnerabilities that would allow an attacker to manipulate the data.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of interesting devices that my company manufactures, like super cool stuff. We were talking earlier about DNA evidence devices, DNA extraction devices, amplification, etc. We have that in one part. We have mass spectrometry. We have different type of huge electron microscopes, where, if there is a major vulnerability, that's a multi-million-dollar piece of equipment. And so you want to make sure that a customer that buys it knows that it's secure and it's not just going to break and be easily tampered with. But then there's also these devices that have, different technology. Like we have dosimeters, for example, for radiation detection. And what if you were able to make that non-functional, and now you're exposing people to large doses of radiation, and they're really not aware because they put their trust and their safety into these types of devices. And so it's really important to get it right.
Well, yeah, so my wife was actually an X-ray technician for a while, and I think before she was pregnant, I asked the question. I'm like, wait, what happens if the technician's pregnant? Like, what do they just get leave? She's like, no, they wear an extra badge that measures your exposure to radiation, and it gets checked on a regular basis. So to your point, Emily, that's a use case where that safety technology is extremely important.
Yeah, it is. And I know, there's some things I wish I could talk about.
Yeah, don't get yourself in trouble now.
No.
Keep drinking. Does she have another cocktail available?
No, we don't want anyone to get in trouble. I was looking, it was funny, Emily and I were chatting earlier, and I was like, I looked into some of this scientific gear because I use an analogy in my supply chain talk about measuring how much caffeine is in my coffee. And it turns out it's really complicated to say how much caffeine is actually in the finished product. You need something like a mass spectrometer, in other words that I don't remember how to pronounce, in order to measure that. And they can be tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars. And the ones that I was looking at to just measure the amount of a substance within another substance, but if those things were to lie, right? My example was, I want to know how much caffeine's in my coffee because I have high blood pressure. I want to limit the amount of caffeine. If the results are lying to people in any kind of a test like that, that could put people at risk.
Yeah, and I think you were mentioning that earlier about that extra machine. So diagnostics related products where it can really make impact the outcome of a patient depending on those test results. And then so you have to look at, of course, how you can attack the device, because that's, for pen testers, it's a really fun part, right? IoT pen testing, I think there's a lot you can do. It's very creative. It's a bit different. It's not your traditional pen test. It gets really fun, right? What if you can try to get root on one of these little microcontrollers that might be into a device, or different parts of a device? But also, how do you make sure that that diagnostic data stays encrypted, is safely shared? Going back to the example earlier of, DNA data, or anything that, for example, you were to sent out to like CODIS. So the Department of Justice has like different regulatory standards for if you have an instrument or a product, anything that is connected to CODIS, like you have to follow a certain set of rules. And so you might want to know that when you're pen testing that, right? You want to make sure that you're paying extra attention at how things are being logged, encrypted, in transit, also at rest. You want to maybe really look into two-factor authentication, which is another requirement for like booking stations. So any kind of DNA swabbing booking station, they have different sets of requirements. So certainly as a pen tester, that kind of influences maybe how you want to approach a test.
What else is different about product penetration? Because there's definitely a niche or a subsection of pen testing that's testing for products versus testing for like live networks or enterprises with users and laptops and things like that, right? There's a lot of differences in that.
There are. I really think I had to retrain myself a little bit coming from the external consultant world into, again, that internal role where you are looking for like how to secure products, which means now you have to secure something, whatever your product is, whether it's hardware, software, maybe a set of software and hardware and cloud, whatever you are packaging and selling to your customer. You want to make sure first and foremost that as soon as that customer like gets that product and uses it or puts it on their network, that it is just safe by default. It has to be secure by default. We don't want to be introducing anything into a customer's environment that would, just because they bought our product, make them less secure. It's really important for us to do that. And then also we want to give a little bit of flexibility to customers. And that means that sometimes your product will be secure by default, but, right, and I think a very easy example is a password policy, right? You want to let your customer maybe customize their own password policy, integrate with SSO, or that you want to let the customer be able to just have that product fit into their whole security, whatever they have that's baked in their environment. And hopefully they don't have to remove security to use that. But once it's in the customer's hands, it's kind of, it's theirs, right? Hopefully they make the best choices security-wise, but by default, if they made no changes at all, it would be secure. Like that's how you want that engagement to go. So typically your recommendations might be to like fall within a certain amount of guidelines. And especially if you're working internally, your recommendations might fit more into how your product teams work, what kinds of resources are available to them. I feel like when you're an external consultant, you kind of have it easy a little bit in the sense that general recommendations for remediation steps are accepted because it's really up to the customer, so that pen test customer, to know their environment, to know their policies, and to kind of take that and run with it. If you're an internal pen testing team, I think there's a bigger expectation. It's more of a collaboration. We change our recommendations fairly regularly, depending on new information that we get from our product team's different feedback, because we want to help them. We don't want to frustrate them. We want them to see us as a resource, like, oh yeah, their recommendation had, you know, an overview of what tools we have and services we have internally in order to help fix this. It's really what we want it to be, just that a much nicer, smoother type of collaborative relationship.
Yeah, and Emilie, I like what you said earlier about how you would work with the product teams and ask them, like, what was the decision behind choosing this technology, right? Rather than just go, you chose cold fusion. Wow, that was really stupid. Which is kind of that I might say that and then immediately retract that and go, no, what I meant to say was what goes behind the decision to select this technology and why, and what would hold you back on changing it. Sounds like more of the conversations that you would have with product teams, which I think is important when it gets to the recommendations, because you can make much better recommendations.
Right, because what do you gain in terms of these questions, right? So first off, you get an understanding of, like, we all know, like, cold fusion's bad, right? We can already put that into a finding into the report. That's great, okay? You can run with it. But if you ask questions, you'll get some really great responses, and now you'll start to uncover perhaps other types of issues within the organization that might be the reason why that was chosen. So you're kind of trying to dig a little bit to find the root cause, right? It's always important to say, is there a process that's like, what is the root cause of this decision?
You just said the magic word, Emilie. All root causes are process related.
No, it's usually someone that used to work there that is no longer here, who is in charge of those decisions, that loved cold fusion, was like, every team has to use cold fusion, and exactly 63% of the teams adopted cold fusion.
You're describing a process, Paul.
Yes. And therefore they're stuck with cold fusion.
All process.
That's usually how
institutionalized.
Yes.
Process.
And moving off of a technology to a new one is hard in general.
It is, and it's costly.
Yes. Yeah, you get in that decision, do I maintain? Do I create workarounds? Or do I rewrite? Because rewriting is expensive for a lot of reasons.
I mean, when you move from an external role, a consulting role, to an internal role, you have more of a responsibility and accountability.
More skin in the game.
To help enable the business, right? And you have to work within the guidelines and the procedures and the process of the business in order to influence. So
also, you got to run into those people in the hallways, or in, I guess now in meetings, in Zoom meetings, right? Like, oh, you're the pen tester that said it was really stupid to run cold fusion, and now you created a shitstorm in my environment, right? I'm not saying that's what happened with Emilie. I'm saying if I were in Emilie's position, that's what would happen, right?
I mean, it's always that difficult conversation, right? Like, you're amazing at what you do. You created this amazing product. It's changing lives. It's changing the world. But from a security perspective, your baby's ugly. How do you put that,
Yeah. It becomes an exercise in risk management, right? Identifying the risk and then having a business conversation on how you get to that outcome.
I think Aaron wanted to say something.
Yeah, did you have your hand up, or were you fidgeting?
Yeah.
Are you all right?
Okay. I was doing the international sign of distress because I realized that we haven't got much time left, but I'm just going to crack in as you've given me the opening. Yes,
please do.
So one of my favorite books is Future Crimes by Mark Goodman. And if he's listening, it's about time we had an updated version, because that was 2016. But so what do you think is the biggest security threat facing medical devices today? And then thinking about the future crimes, do you think that's going to change in the future?
That's a great question. It's hard to not to give one answer without it being, I feel like, oversimplified. But I think some common issues across medical devices is related to things that can't be updated. So operating systems that are outdated but cannot be updated. And I think especially from a design perspective, not thinking ahead. So not thinking we try to do everything our team recommends, like, at least to think about 10 years time of security updates for any product. And I think that's really difficult to do. It requires a lot of resources, but I do think that a lot of the issues I've seen, not just my company, but across the medical device field, had to do with just outdated operating systems, unpatched systems, Hard-coded credentials, I'd say, is still a pretty major issue. It's getting better because of different laws like SB 327 in California that says you can't have hard-coded credentials in a device that's internet connected. So I'm going to keep it really simple. I don't think it's anything fancy. I think it's outdated operating systems, outdated software, libraries, hard-coded credentials, I would say are, or no authentication.
Yeah, but Emilie, I think what's also amazing about what you're saying is kind of where I'm going with the solution to this problem, that it's regulation and standards that, and not just guidelines, but hard and fast regulations that say, if you don't meet this standard, we, FDA, will not approve it. We, country of France, as an example, won't buy it. We can't buy it because it doesn't meet the standard. And you hinted towards a couple of things like that in scientific. If it's used in this scenario and it doesn't meet the standard, it means you can't buy it. You can't sell it. And that, I think, is the only thing, like truly the only thing that we have right now to keep our products in our lives more secure in a lot of these situations. The problem is it doesn't transfer to consumer IoT. No one cares if your home security camera is secure or not. No one cares. No one cares.
Yeah, your toaster. You're not.
Your Linux toaster, you're screwed. You're screwed. You're going to get burnt toast.
Do you think it keeps anybody awake at night that somebody's going to go round with a device like a Flipper Zero turning off pacemakers?
I think it could easily happen. I just think of an example, like, you know how your local power substation, at least in the US, just buy like a whole bunch of like heavy chain link fence and just chuck that over, and then like boom, the power goes out. Like there's a lot of great attacks that can impact a lot of people in their lives that are probably fairly straightforward. But so far, I mean, I haven't heard of cases. Have you of like any of these types of attacks?
Cases where loss of life because of
like mass loss of life or mass attacks on folks via a certain medical device. I haven't heard of anything of this sort.
On devices, I'm not sure. I know Josh Corman and I have spoken several times. And every time it comes up, I ask him, I'm like, what are the links to those things? There's a study that shows that specifically ransomware and attacks on medical facilities have led to loss of life. So we've proven that, right? But that's not what you're talking about, Emilie. That's like a different thing, right? Where we're talking about actual devices in the wild. I'm not sure. I would ask Josh if he's studied that or has studies in that when he worked at CISA. So.
Yeah, was that the NHS that had ransomware and that unfortunately led to, was that last year?
It was two or 3 years ago. Josh said something to me about that, and I don't remember what it was now. I don't think he discounted that story, but it didn't sound as impactful when he talked about it with me for some reason. I forget exactly why.
We do have regulations within medical device environments or medical environments.
Yeah, those are new. Sorry to interrupt, but this was in my slide presentation I gave last week. They're the new FDA regulations that are like, we will not approve as the FDA your medical device if it contains security vulnerabilities. Josh was a big proponent of that, led the charge. There was lots of other people involved. But to me, that's a huge win, right? For the things we're talking about for scientific gear, like is made at your day job, for things that have to do with DNA and all the different scenarios we talked about, right? I think it's regulation like this that can really help. God, I can't believe I'm saying that. I used to be like, government regulation's evil. It's Big Brother coming after you. Now,
but it's the PCI rubbing off. It's the carrot and the stick. You have to. Yeah. You know what I mean? There has to be some.
What's wrong with me? I like PCI now. What's happening?
We need a baseline. We need to be able to trust the devices that we use at our most vulnerable state, right? That's really what it comes down to. We need to be able to trust that when we're vulnerable, when we're frail, when we're at our worst, when we're going through a hard time, and we're seeking out that help, that we can trust those locations, so those medical environments, those hospitals, but also especially those devices.
When we're overheating because of the high-risk fake pregnancy.
Yes. The high-risk fake pregnancy.
But Paul, to your point, overreaching legislation is bad, but I don't consider this overreaching.
There is, yes. Smarter people than I have said that it's regulation that got us things like roads and critical infrastructure, and that was important, that legislation that led to that, right? I think it was Schneier that said that regulation that gets passed without input from those affected will almost always lead to bad regulation.
This is Schoolhouse Rock. Watch I'm Only a Bill episode. That's what you're talking about.
I'm just a bill.
Yes. I mean, I'm serious. Yeah. That's exactly the topic of that episode. Is there's people getting hurt because buses are getting stuck on train tracks. So we need to make a law.
Yeah. But over regulation kills innovation, in which that is the thing too.
I think the point here is that we can't solve issues like that with technology when it really comes down to it being a lack of law, regulation, policy. I see that a lot in privacy, a lack of data privacy regulation, and a lot of the folks that I'll help, in my other job.
Tell us about that. Sorry, that's good. I'm sorry. In the few minutes we have remaining, tell us about your other work that you do.
Sure. So, I'm a privacy and security ambassador for Future Ada. We're a local nonprofit out in the Spokane, Washington area, and we do a lot of workshops, and we do a lot of technology support for survivors of intimate partner violence, and we also help out with technology for any underrepresented group that requires that help. We do a lot of talks within groups in the community on how to stay safe with different facets of technology. I'm a huge OSINT nerd. I love OSINT. I love privacy. And I think one topic I'd love to see more hackers get into is, sure, we can host crypto parties. We can, have our own self-hosted passwords, vaults. We can use Proton Mail. We can try to make sure that everything we use at home, it has the least amount of data leakage possible. But your average person, it's really hard for them to implement privacy properly. And I don't even know that it's possible to have full privacy nowadays. But I feel like sometimes in the privacy world, we're trying to fix issues with technology that really come down to being a lack of regulation. And again, I'd just love to see more hackers get involved in that.
Fantastic. Emily, are you ready to play 5 questions with Security Weekly?
Oh my God. Yes, I forgot about this. Yes.
Why are they always surprised?
I know, right? 3 words to describe yourself.
Pink, fabulous, and techie.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
Oh, definitely. Definitely a laptop and a HackRF.
Nice.
Get into those medical devices.
When you said definitely, I wasn't sure if it was going to go samurai sword or something technical. I was really on the fence. If you write a book about yourself, Emily, what would the title be?
Oh my God. I should have prepared for this. Cats and hacking.
What is your favorite hacker movie?
That's hard. I like Sneakers.
But
Sneakers for the win. Nope. We gotta move on. We gotta move on. Gotta move on.
Feeling a butt.
There's one with Sandra Bullock. I forget which.
The net.
Yeah, I watched this one recently, and I think it's really growing on me. So, yeah, it's hard.
I agree. Multiple viewings of the net, it definitely grows on me. There's some really funny lines in that movie.
Yeah.
Choose 2 celebrities to be your parents.
Alive, dead, fictional, or otherwise.
Ooh. I'm gonna go with Morticia and Gomez from the Addams Family because I love them. I just love their chemistry and they're great role models.
Okay, Wednesday.
That is awesome.
Tuesday.
Fantastic.
That is awesome.
So it's Wednesday today.
Well, there's already a Tuesday. You have to be Wednesday.
Fantastic. Emily, thank you so much for appearing on Paul's Security Weekly.
Thank you for having me, and cheers.
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 With that, my martini's done, and we'll take a break, and we'll come back with the security news. Stay tuned.